Okay, so all I did was I just created this like Flask app right here. There's nothing, nothing in the bag. Um, Notice, by the way, like I did see some students get into an error with this. If it's called just Flask, or if this file is called Flask, it can, just raise an error with the library. So we'll create a new file called app.py. Let's do this code start. Maybe too many things open. And feel free, like, in the chat or whatever, as I go through this review, especially if there's something you feel kind of unsure of, just put it in the chat and, I'll try to answer it. All right, so the first thing is, right, we want to, from the Flask library, import our Flask class, right? And then we want to initialize a new application, right? Remember, we passed through the name, this Dunder name variable, and this is referencing like the name of the file. Okay, so we're creating a new instance of an application, and then I guess we can get this out of the way now. I think this takes like a template folder equals views, and this is so that ultimately when we display the HTML, it will look for it inside of a views folder. And then the next thing to do is define some routes, right? So add app.route, and then we'll have the slash, and we'll say when someone visits, remember this is referred to as the root URL, right? Like the equivalent would be, like ESPN.com. So when someone visits this, then, and you can call this like home, or, if it's the home page, etc. Then we can return some, say welcome to ESPN. Okay. Then the next thing is we want to do app.run, right? We'll leave out the debug equals true for now, just to show you the impact of it, right? If we now run our application, app.py, you can see it's telling us that this is now running over here. I can directly click on it. I'm pressing Command on my Mac and then clicking. And now it's taking me to, this is equivalent to the root URL, right? So it's running this function and then sending back this text of welcome to ESPN. If I change this, like put like some exclamation points here or something like that, it's not going to display, like none of my updates are getting. So what I need to do, right, is put in the debug equals true. And now, if I first shut this down, kind of like reset it, one, I can start to see this, but then also, if I change it back, that should be immediately picked up without me, like, having to shut down the server. Okay? All right. So that's the first thing. From there, we can like set additional routes, right? So we can, let's say, like def. Basically, what we're doing is we're giving the user the ability to call different functions, okay? And what's sent back is the return value. So now, say if you want to do like, NHL. Sorry, what am I doing? I would do like app.route and say they go to /NHL. Then I'll do def NHL. We can call this like the index, and we'll return just like welcome to NHL for now. Okay, so we get to call essentially two different functions now. One is through the root URL. When a user visits this, it will return this function. When a user visits /NHL, it will run this function. Okay. Let's see where we are. All right. So this is sometimes, I guess, when you make the update, like you're kind of in a broken state, right? Like if I don't have this defined. So that's what's going on here. And then because this, you could see that, right? It broke because I was still typing out the definition. And now I'm not sure if Chrome will like visiting this web page anymore. It does not, right? So one way I can fix this, I can try to just do incognito mode. So what I'm pressing is on my Mac, I'm pressing Command Shift and then the letter N, okay? And then we can, copy this, I guess. All right, and now I have welcome to ESPN. All right, so we go here, hits the slash, so it runs this function. Then the next thing is /NHL, it will run this function. Cool, so now it has welcome to NHL. Any questions about that? Anything there? No? Okay. The next thing perhaps is like parameters, right? So let's say we have like NHL. You know what we'll do? We'll do NHL/players, and this will eventually we'll use this to list all of the players. Okay? So if we have /NHL/players, this is kind of, whoa. I must have just gotten into a broken state again. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Actually, no. Let's take a look at this error message. Oh, I cleared it. Let's, I'll run this. There we go. So here's the error. It says an assertion error. A view function mapping is overwriting an existing endpoint function, NHL index, right? And you can even start to see, remember we kind of have this mess right here, but you can even see further up, it's telling, this is my code, right? Line 14. So we can basically use these clues. So we'll keep in mind the error message. A function mapping is overwriting an existing endpoint function, and that it's breaking at line 14. So we're breaking here. And remember it says it complained about the NHL index. So the problem is that I'm using the same function name twice. So I should call this NHL players. That will work. And now try to rerun it. I may have to start a new session. Yeah, you see, it's because Chrome doesn't like the fact that we're accessing so Chrome doesn't like the fact that we're trying to access a website that it broke, that was broken. So it's trying to help us. So another thing we can do is just create a guest. Go to a guest account. And now if I click that, this is on my guest account. So you can see now it's allowing it again. And now I can go to /NHL/players, and we're good, okay? So the next thing we'll do is we'll create a page for an individual players. And this will be NHL/players/ and that'll be the alligator and then the name of the player. Now, if we go here, what's going to happen? So first of all, to go here, I'll go to /NHL/players/ then anyone's name. Okay? So we can put in a name here, and it's going to execute this function like this, NHL players, and it's going to try to do name equals Brian, right? But because we're not accepting any argument, we'll get an error message. Let's see if we can see the error message. No, I guess not. Oh, did I replace the same thing? I keep making this error. Sorry about that. Let's do this. Right, this function name is the same. We'll call this NHL show player. And then let's go to a new guest. Close guest. Let's see, or I can go to person 1, I guess. And local. Let's go back here. All right, so we're good. /NHL/players. We'll list, eventually we'll list all the players here. /Sam. And now there's the error message we expect, right? So it says it's receiving an unexpected keyword argument. Why? Because we're calling this function, but it does not take an argument yet. So we just place a name here, and now we can use that argument. Let's see if it doesn't like that either. Let's. Can I just do something else? If I go back to guest. Okay, we're back. So we can go to /NHL/players/Sam, right? And what will happen is it will execute this, but the name equals Sam. And then we should be able to see show player Sam. Okay? And we can change this to whoever, Claude, right? And now it changes it. This. So here, we're passing an argument to a function. That's basically what's happening. Cool. Okay, next thing. Next thing now is instead of displaying this directly as a string, generally what we do is we render HTML, right? So to do that, we'll create a new file, index.html. We can do that. We can, what we'll do actually even better is we'll just do the players. Let's rename this. Call this players. You can call this whatever you want. It is good to just do something that makes sense. So we'll do players.html, and then we will. You can imagine us creating a UL and then having some LIs that has Claude, Sam, right, and Brian. And now instead of just returning this string, we can render the template. So that means I need to import that function. Okay. And what template do we want to render? Players.html. Okay. So now it's going to, when we go to /NHL/players, it's going to hit this function. This function is going to say to basically read this file, and then it will display this return value. You're still going to need the word return here. If you don't, it's not going to, this is just a string, ultimately, that's thrown back, and it's not going to know. It's not going to return anything. So let's, okay, it looks like we're okay. Let's go to /players. There's our three things. You notice that this is HTML, right? And it's matching this. Okay, now for something maybe different. So let's do this show player. We'll do the same thing. Make this a new file. I'll call this show player.html. I'm going to use the right format, the right naming convention. So generally what you'll do is we can, under here, put players, create a players folder, and then because we're displaying all of these, we'll call this the index file. This is just a convention. All right? And then for this one, I'm going to call this just the show. So the convention is when we have a page that's designed to display all of the entities, all of the items, that's going to be the index page. We'll call that index.html. And when we're just going to show an individual player, we'll call that show, the show page. Okay? So you can call this players index if you want. It doesn't really, just to line up, make it more consistent. And then here we can call this players show. And if you look at where this file is located, it's really located in players/index.html. And then this, what we're going to ultimately render here is render the template players show.html. Okay? And let's just say welcome to the show. All right. So if I go to /players, this still works, right? It's now rendering the new template, players index.html. If I go to an individual player, like Sam, this right now calls, right? I'm putting in an argument here. We're not using it, but this is going to call the show page. Okay, so here's the next thing. We want to go back to saying, like, welcome to the player page. How do we do that? It turns out this function, render template, takes an optional argument or arguments, right? So I can say, like, player name equals, and what do I want it to equal? The name. So I'm taking, so if you think of what's happening, someone's going to go to /NHL/player/Claude. That's going to be passed through here, and then we're going to pass that argument into the next function, render template. From there, we can access this over here, as long as we do this thing, and we want to call it the name. So I think that lines up. Oh, sorry, player name. So first, let me just see if it works, and then we'll review this. Yeah, I broke it. It just didn't. It's because I was in progress. Let's see if we can go back to another thing. See if I can go back here. Okay, we're back. Slash. So we want to go to /NHL/player/Claude, something like that. /NHL/players/Claude. You see that? And it says welcome to the Claude page. If we change this to Sam, it now says welcome to the Sam page. So how does this work? We're passing through the argument name here. From there, it's then executing this function. So this is Sam. And now it's passing that variable, Sam, here. And then over in our HTML, what we do is we're putting this 2 squiggly brackets here. All right? So this is basically accessing Python. All right, when we do these 2 squiggly brackets. This is called Jinja. I think you can put any Python you want. Like if you put 1+1 here, and now let's refresh. You see that? It's spitting out 2. Okay. That feel all right? So again, the reason why we kind of show this is because this pattern is very often followed. For example, if we go to like the roster of the New York Knicks, right? You can see this is like the index page. It's listing all the players, and then you click on an individual player, and this is the show page, right? And you can see that, here you're passing through the name. Really, it's the ID that matters, and then it's taking that ID. Eventually, we're going to connect this to the database. Really, what it's doing is pulling, select all from players where ID equals this, and then using that information to embed some logic, embed some data into NHL, right, into the page. Okay, what would the index page be? Just to give you a little preview, what's like select all from players where team equals New York Knicks, right, or something like that. Select all from players, join teams on, right, and then where team name equals New York Knicks. So this is kind of what we're gonna move into, but for right now, we're just taking the data and displaying it. If you think about ultimately what we want to do with the index, let's say we have, really what we want to do here is link to each one of these player pages, just like over here, each one on the index page, we can link to each individual player, right? So if you look at it, like this is our A tag, of course, right? Here's our A tag linking to the player. So what we want to do is go create an A tag. Can I not do that? Okay, so here's my A tag. We'll do Claude, and then we'll link. Are there any cases where there could be more than one template views folder? If so, how can you point to both? Yeah, it's a good question, right? The question is, can we have more than one, not more than one views folder, but let's say we have players, maybe you also make a folder for teams, right? And then what you would do is add app route NHL, right, teams, and that will go into the teams, right, /index.html, and you'd create an index file for that, okay? So this is like REST, right? This is our player's resource, is a way to think about this. We can review REST in a second. But, okay, so where were we? So we have this, we wanted to basically link to the show page, right? So we have Claude. We're going to go to what do we want to go to? /players/ Claude, I think. So when you click on this, take you to /players, basically construct, /NHL/players/ Claude, right? This is where we want to take you. I don't know if we need this // we'll find out. And then we'll do the same thing with Sam. And then we'll do the same thing, of course, with Brian. These should be capital letters. Same. All right, so now let's go to NHL/players. We broke. Let's create a new guest. Yeah. Oh wait, look at that. We got that same error message. We're overwriting an existing function. I think it's because, did I copy something? Maybe my teams. I deleted it. All right, let's try doing this again. See if there's any errors. This looks okay. We'll go here. We're good. We'll go to /NHL/players. All right, so notice we have the links. If you inspect the link, right, it looks pretty good to me, I think. Okay, that works. So I click on each player, and all it does is it links me to NHL/players/Claude. Remember, this is exactly what we wanted to go to for the show page, right? This is Claude's show page. The same thing that we saw in ESPN.com, Knicks. If we go to RJ Barrett, we see this URL, right? It takes us to this URL. And the way that it's doing that is the same mechanism. If you look at the link, it's saying when you click here, go to this URL, right? And we're doing the same thing. When you click on this, go here, right? So now this seems to work pretty well. That when I click on, can I refresh this? No. When I click on any of these players, right, it takes me to the equivalent show page. The next thing is, you just think, like, there's a lot of players, right, to list, especially if this is, say, listing all the NHL players. So what we want to do is really loop through, and there's repetition here, right? So really what we want to do is like loop through and, have like programmatically create these list elements. So, what you can do in Jinja is, let's see if I can do it. I think it's these percentages. You can say like for player in players or something like that. And maybe we could even, you can have a list if you want. I don't know if it will let me. We'll see. In like Claude, Sam, Brian, right? And what we would want to do is for each one of them have do something like this. Yeah, it would be 2 quotes and have the player be here and the same player be here. So for each player in this list, we will spit out this li, and then you need to say that you're ending the for loop in Jinja. So you do end for percentage here. Let's see if this works. I don't know if that will. I need to go to NHL players. Oh, that worked. I'm surprised. So what can we do? So we're doing a loop here, right? Just like in Python, but there's no like kind of indentation in HTML. So we just have to be pretty explicit that my loop begins here and it ends here. All right? And now we're saying for each player in this list, I want you to create this HTML and reference this player. Notice for things like for loops, like there's no output on this line. That's why you have this squiggly bracket percentage. Like there's no output displayed here. For things where you are displaying an output, right? Like you use the double squigglies. So let me just maybe show you a couple more examples. You can just say like for each player, display the text hello. Right, so it displays hello 3 times. And then you can embed it with, make this HTML. So first create the UL, then for each player in the list, create like a bullet point. Then from there, of course, we can start to use this data, and you can say, okay, for each player, let's maybe display the player name. So that's now displaying. Because now I'm doing this double squiggly. And now how do I really want to do this? Well, inside of an A tag. So I'll do A tag href equals slash, and it's the URL I want to construct. So slash NHL slash players slash, instead of this text, I want to, here, I want it in here as well. So it'll be player. And then I want to display, this is the content that I want to display as well inside the A tag. So now that's kind of how we get back to this. And I think this works. Then the last thing is, we're not going to put these names directly here. Instead, what we'll do is have this be the word players. And now where is this going to be defined? Back in the app, in the index page, we'll have a variable called players, and it will be maybe this list. Okay? Again, ultimately what we'll do is we'll call the select all from players in the database and pass that list that way. But for now, we can just have a list of players. Here are my player names. And we can define player names here. So we'll take, when you go to /NHL players, it will get this list, pass the list into the template, and then we can access it through the name players. Then we go here, we loop through, we access this variable, this is our list, and we say for each player in the list of players, display, construct this link. So that's kind of, completing the loop. Questions about that? I don't see anything in the chat. But let me just... So one thing to note is, like, in the index page, you're having the user call the correct URL, right? You're saying when you click on Claude, it makes sense that you want to go to the Claude page, right? So you're just like making the link for the user, just the same way as, like ESPN is, so we set up each of the URLs so that when you click on Claude, right, it will click on that page for you. And we did that by just using a little bit of logic. Okay. All right. So there we have is just to like keep in mind the process of what occurs. This is called, like, what we're kind of learning is what's called like the request response cycle. Can you all see me typing here? Yeah? No, you can't see? No.
All right.
Let me try it again. All right.
Yes.
Now it looks better. All right, so this is called the request. You see that underline? This is called the request response cycle. So the idea is, what happens is that it starts with a request from the browser, and this process is always being followed. Like you're always going to start with a request from the client, meaning in our case, it's like from the browser, right? So someone goes to ESPN.com / right / what's the next thing that happens? We go to this is going to be called the controller, and in our case it was the app.py file, right? So we'll start to formalize these terms soon, but this is basically where our routes are defined, right? And what happens? Python's just going to go down the list, right? Flask is just going to go down the list through this file and look for a match, right? So it'd be like @app.route / right? And then it will be, and then it will find, def home. So it finds a match, right? It will run that function. If it doesn't, if you say put in like /NASCAR, right? And then it doesn't, there is no corresponding route, it's going to break here. It's going to break and say, hey, like, undefined 404, undefined URL, something like that, right? So basically the idea is you want to look for the mismatch here. Like you want to look to see, okay, I'm typing in this and it's not defined over here. The next thing that would occur is that instead of doing, let's say the user goes to /NHL. So again, like request response cycle, first thing we start with the browser. So it goes to ESPN.com /NHL. Sorry, this should be an H. It's going to look for a route @app.route /NHL. Then we'll do def NHL. And here we'll return, and it'll be render template, right? Which is normally like kind of what we'll be doing. Sorry, render template. Again, so now you see the error here. It may say, hey, I can't find a view, right? So what you're going to be doing is, again, looking for a mismatch. Like let's say it's called, NHL.html, but we haven't defined this, right? At this point, you should know, like, this route is looking good because this is the first step, but there's a mismatch here, right? What's the next thing? Like maybe you're passing through like a list of teams, right? And you have that defined somewhere here. These are just hockey teams. Sabres. Okay? So, right, we're defining our variable. You're passing this through. Then what happens after the controller? We actually render the the HTML. So now we go to the next step, which is our HTML page. Let's say this is like what do we call it? NHL.html, right? And now over here, this is where we have the Jinja that has the word teams, right? Where you can do for team and teams, right? And now here we'll do the percentage. That should actually be here. For team and teams, like this. And then we'll render the team. There's some sort of li. And then the team. Okay? So this is going to be generated. Like the actual, 3 LIs are going to be generated. And then that's what we're going to throw back, right? That's what we're going to send back to the browser. So this is called the request response cycle because the browser, meaning like the user by going to a web page is making a request. They're asking for certain information, right? They're asking to see information about the NHL. And that takes us here. We get back, we kind of produce, we go through the controller, right? We look for our list of routes, find a match, run this function. HTML is generated. We need the word return here, right? And this is sent back as the response. This part right here, whatever you're returning, this is the response. This response is sent, to the user, sent back to the user, right? Through the web to your browser. So the request is coming from the URL. The response is, in this case, the HTML that's ultimately produced and sent back to the user. So again, why am I kind of slowly going through this? It's because for debugging, right? Like when you're debugging, it's important to think about, okay, where must we have already been successful? And now if we're breaking okay, undefined, maybe there's a mismatch here that you have, you have this word teams here, but it's not defined. But here we spell it, we're missing an A or something, right? It's going to break and say this word Thames is not defined. Okay, so it's just important to think about where are we? When you click on a link, let's now move to the code base. Also, this is a very, we can review, we'll be reviewing this again. This is a very popular interview question, or at least it used to be. More for back-end development, but still valuable. So what's happening here? Right here, when you click on a link, again, the first step is you're making a request, right? You're putting a URL. You can think of this as putting the URL into the browser, right? So if we just run this, Python 3 app.py, and we make a request, let's go to, sorry about that. So how do I find out what URL this is? I go to my app. This is where my routes are defined. And I know that this is, if I go to NHL/players, it will run, right? I'm making the request right now. I'm making a request for players. It will go look for this match, find it, run this function, generate this HTML, send it back as the response. Okay, and now when I click on this, what is this? When you click on this link, this is equivalent to basically pasting the link, right, the URL, everything that's listed in the href, to pasting this thing in the browser and thus making another request, right? So now again, request response cycle starts again. So we go to NHL/player/Claude. It's going to go through the list. No match here because there needs to be another slash. Now here's a match. NHL/player/something. Run this function. Look for players show HTML. Pass through the data. Where's this coming from? It's coming from Claude, right? The word Claude. Right, that's the argument being passed through. Then we go to the show page, display this. This is being generated. This template is being generated and then sent back to the user as the response. Okay. Click on this, each one of these links. This is a new beginning of a request response cycle. This is a new request to your web application. When you refresh the page, this is a new web request, right? And you can see this generated. You see this? Make a GET request to /NHL players. The response is 200 because it was successful. Make a GET request to /NHL player/Claude. The response is 200 because it's successful. Questions about, and we'll build on this, but how does that feel so far? Any questions about this? Okay. I mean, it's good to just put in breakpoints to make sure you're able to follow this process. This is time well spent. So the next thing to do is we can get into a database. All right, so let me just create a new file called app.py. This is where we want to connect our Flask application to a database. And we can just start with, honestly, SQLite. So we'll do import SQLite 3. And then we do SQLite 3 dot connect. Is it connect? Hold on. It's a connect, yeah. I want to connect to, I have a database here, nhl.db. And this will be my connection, connection.cursor. Right, here's my cursor. And then just to run this real fast, let's just run this. Python 3-i, we'll put in interactive app.py, right? And we have access to my cursor, and my cursor is connected to the database. So I should be able to do cursor.execute, select all from players, semicolon, and then cursor.fetch all. Right, and then you can see I have a pre-populated a list of NHL players in here. Right, and this is returning a list of tuples. Okay, so what we want to do, like when you build an API, remember we went to like the Google Books API, right? And what happened was, you know, we went and we looked for like an example book. I don't know if I can find it. Maybe under using the API, and we search like maybe you can get all the books, right? And then from there you can look for a specific book, right? Like that's what we're doing now. Like this whole website is really like allowing developers to get data from the database. That's really the whole point of this thing. So now we're learning how to do that. Like how do we build an API that allows people to access our database? So the way we do that is, you know, we basically say, okay, if I want to send back all of the players, what should I do? So it would be create a Flask app. So we need to say from Flask, import capital Flask, build a new Flask app, pass through the name. And then what I can do here is say when a user goes to the route, let's say /players, I want to return, I'll call this, you can call this like players index or just players, it's fine. And then what are we going to do? We'll connect to the database, we will create a cursor, we'll do cursor.fetchAll, right? And this should return to us that list of players, right? This list right here that we saw. Now you can, if we return this, let's call this my players tuples. I don't love that name. We'll just call it that for now. And now we return this. You could like almost try to send this back as JSON. That's gonna break, I think. Let's try it. So in order to do that, I have to remove this I because it's no longer, I don't want it to be interactive. I want, oh, what am I missing? So if I run this, nothing happens. Let's think about why, right? I'm forgetting that app.run debug equals true. Right, so the first thing I need to have happen is for it to start up my application. Let's close this down. And now it's starting it up. Let's try to use, someone suggested using Safari instead of Chrome. Okay, so look at this. URL was not found on the server. Why is this not found? Well, I'm going to slash, but the only route that's defined is players. So I should be going to his players. Okay, now it says this. Look at the error. The view function did not return a valid response. The return type must be a string, a dictionary, a tuple, response instance, or whatever, but it was a list. So what is this telling me? This is telling me, hey, you're returning a list right here, which makes sense. If you remember, that's what's happening when we do cursor.fetchAll. And it's telling me as an error message, like, sorry, I need to go to Safari. It's telling me as an error message, lists are not allowed. So instead what we can do is we can turn, I'll show you guys this. We can turn this list into JSON. Let me show you how to do that. I think we just do, yeah, JSONify. And you can do this. This is my JSON data. I'll put a breakpoint here. So I'm making a request. I wonder if I'm in my breakpoint. Let's run this again. Make a request. I should be in my breakpoint.
To players?
Oh, thank you. I'm not in players. No, this is players. All right, let's try Chrome. I give up. Here's my breakpoint. Yeah, let's try it. Let's copy this. Okay, I need to go to players. Okay, this is pausing, right? And we can see it right here. Where we are right now is right here. So what has occurred? We have made a request to /players. Flask has seen this route, right? Seen the match, run the function, and paused right here. So if you look at players tuples, this is nothing. Why is that? Connection.cursor, cursor.fetchAll. I did not make any execution. I'm sorry, gang. Cursor.execute. Select all from players. Oh look, it seems like it reran it for me. Let's see if now it's updated. Players, tuples. There it is. So I forgot to do the cursor.execute, but once I entered it, it apparently like reran this for me. I don't know why, but it did. So now if I look at this, select all from players, if I look at the players tuples, this is returning me a list. If you look at the type, right, players tuples is a list, and it looks like a list. So instead, this JSONify function, you can see if I JSONify the players tuples, I don't know how to display this to you, but this is, oh man, let me see. So if I just JSONify the players tuples .dunderDict, right, because it's returning to me an instance, there you can see it, and it's returning this under response. So you can see this, JSONify players tuples .response is returning me a string of data. And this is what I'll send back to the browser, is actually something that's like a string, like it's a stringified version of my data that I'm allowed to send back. So remember, I'm not allowed to send back a Python list through the internet. The internet doesn't really know anything about like a Python list, but it understands strings. So what I need to do is first turn this into a string and then send that back through the internet. Let's take a look. You see that? There it is. So think about what's occurring. We're going to /players. We are then connecting to our database, going to our database, and now fetching data, right? Getting that data back, and then sending that data back to the user. Okay. So this is the index page, right? You can take this data, by the way, and like, you know, if you want to, right, we can pass, like, one thing, we're returning JSON data, like an API. Like, we can also return HTML data if we want to, right? You can do the render template and pass through, you know, we'd have to render template and what is it called, default views or something like that, I forget, but we can, you know, render, you know, index.html and pass through the data here as well. Let's just do that real fast, right? So we have this player's data. Let's say we want to display index.html. How are we going to stitch these two things together? So we'll render index.html. Let's just get this working. So let's make sure we can see like hello world. So now if I refresh this, it's broken. Let's go to a different kind of user person. 5,000/players. Oh man, I'm surprised. Let's just do this. /players. Yeah, this should work. Okay, it says template not found index.html. What was the name of this? Is it default? Thanks. Template folder. Thanks, Kumar. Appreciate it. Template folder equals views. Right, and we'll make this a new folder called views and move this in there. Move. We may have to, okay, name JSON data is not defined. That's fine. We want to return this. So we want to return the HTML. So I'm commenting out the JSONified, so we no longer need that. Instead, we're connecting to our database, selecting from the database, getting back the data. We're not going to do anything with it yet. We'll do that in a second. And now we're just going to render the template index.html, and that template says hello world. All right, so we're sending this back. The next step, of course, is to pass through players. Players equals players, right? So pass through, you can call these the players tuples if you want, right? That's what we're naming it here. It's the players tuples. And so now what does that mean? I have access, right? I can do here for player tuple in players tuples, we can display each one. So we can do player tuple square bracket 1, something like that, right? Because remember, each one of these is going to be kind of like this, like a list of tuples. It has like 0, I think it has like Connor Bowman or whatever. And then, you know, the team name or something like that. So for each element in the list, we'll loop through, pull out the second item. This way we're not just pulling out like the index. Pull out the second item and display it. So for each player tuple in that, let's display the second item in the tuple, and then let's end our for loop. Let's tab this in. We should. And I didn't, do I not have debug equals true? Debug equals true. I may have to shut this down. Let's see. So I'm going to go to /players, render the template, index.html, for each player in players tuples. This should be fine. Unless, so the only thing I can think of, so we're seeing hello world. It's possible that this data is not, that there are no player tuples. Let's see if we can debug this. So I'll put a breakpoint right here. Because, why do I say that? Because if there is no data here, the loop's not going to be occurring. I may be getting it. Should player tuple, it should be player and players. Let's take a look. Everyone is right but me. Okay, so this should be players, right? I'm doing a mismatch right now. This variable is players, and I'm referencing player tuples. So thank you all. There we go. So for player and players, I'll say for player tuple and players, player tuple square bracket 1, just so I can kind of keep track of this data. And now I'll refresh. Let's see if we get anything. Oh, I'm in my breakpoint. Let's do continue. You can even see this, like probably. If you look at the output of this here, you can see the HTML. And here it's printing out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not super helpful. Let's update this. Let's just make it like item number 2 and item number 3. And then we'll just run this one more time. I just want to remove the breakpoint, and then we'll run this again, and I'll go through this a little more slowly. Okay, so this is now displaying our data. How is this working? So we are selecting all the data. We are getting back a list that looks something like this. 0. I think there was like 2 zeros, like 2 IDs for each person, which is making things a little weird. And then we have the next person. Okay. And now we're taking this data from the database, passing it through the index.html. Then we're going through each list, each tuple, and selecting the third and fourth element. And because of that, we're seeing, the name and their number. Each player has a number they wear in the back, right? So we're seeing that information here. And if we want to make it a little cleaner, which we probably do, we'll just put a I here. All right, and now this is, a lot nicer. Cool. Thank you all. Okay, so what's happening here, just to update our diagram, if you want to think about what's happening, let me clear this. That's not an eraser. Can you see me erasing? You guys can see, no? All right, let me share it again. Not that. There we go. Okay. So what's happening? This pattern is called, so we're making a request from the browser, right? We go to /players. Okay, so /players. What happens? It goes through the internet, right?
It's frozen again.
Oh, it's frozen again? Thanks. Maybe I have to update Zoom or something. Can you guys see this if I'm drawing? Yeah? You do? Yeah. Okay. So this is the browser. You make a request. What happens next? It goes to the controller, right? The app.py file. Then what happens? It waits until it finds the route that is /players. I think I can just move to typing here. It finds the route that is /players and then calls the function underneath. This function underneath, def players, calls the database, cursor.execute, select all. So this is going to now go to the database. All right? And retrieve the data, right? We'll assign this to be my tuples. Then from there, it will construct either HTML or JSON. So this will be either HTML or JSON, and that's what it will send back to the browser. All right? This pattern, especially when we soon update it, is known as model view controller. Okay? The controller is this file, the file that has the routes defined. This is the controller. Okay? The view is what the browser receives, gets back. So that's either the HTML or the JSON. Okay, that's the view. And then the model is kind of the database. As we'll see, we're going to update this so that actually what we do is we're going to take the data and combine it with a class. All right, but that's going to be the model layer is like the data layer. Okay. One thing that's kind of annoying about the phrase model view controller is it's not totally in order with the request response cycle, right? Someone makes a request from the browser, controller happens first, right? First it goes to the controller, finds the matching route, then it goes to the model, the data layer, right, to the database, and then it sends back the data. That's the view, what the user sees. The user sees either JSON or HTML, right? When you go to a web page, you don't even, like maybe before this class, you didn't even think about that there's a data underneath, that there's a database underneath. All you see is the pretty pictures, right? That's the view. The view is what you see. Same thing with like the JSON. Like, we didn't really know how everything worked underneath. All you care about as a user is like the view. What do I get back, right? The JSON or the HTML. Questions about that? Let me check the chat. Would you ever select the attribute directly with SQL, or is it normal to select star and then clean up from Python? For example, maybe you could just do select name from players instead of select all from players. Yeah, that's totally fine. What Brian's suggesting is a valid point, right? Which is, hey, why not? We'll see that we can make this a little bit easier, but Brian's saying, hey, just to make this it feels a little cleaner if we, instead of select all for players, maybe we say like select ID, name, number, right? Just select the fields we want. Now, what we'll soon do, however, maybe we'll do this with the show route. Yeah, let's do this with the show route. So the show route, we view one individual player, right? So we'll do players, and let's call this player route before I forget. And it'll be players / I guess we'll use the name. It could really, last times it's often the ID. We'll do the name. No, we'll do the ID. All right, so what would this be? Select all from players where ID equals, and then you could, I guess for now we'll make this an F string. Really what you should do, so we could make this an F string, I guess, and say catch the ID here and then get the ID here. We'll talk about, this is actually a bad idea. Just for now, just know, we'll talk about why in a little bit, but just know that you can do this instead. You replace this ID equals question mark. You replace the ID directly with ID equals question mark. This works with any variable, and you pass through the variable name right here. All right, so now we'll take the ID, we'll get in this thing right here. So say we pass through the number 1. The number 1 will be passed through here, and then we will replace this question mark with the number 1. So we'll select all from players where the ID equals, right, like 1. And then what will we do? Players tuples cursor.fetch. You do cursor.fetch all, and then maybe we'll just return the JSONified data for now. All right, I'll explain this in 1 second, why we're doing it this way. Did I make a mistake again? Yeah, this looks okay. So if I go now to /players, let's also display their ID. We'll select all from name players, and let's display the ID. This way we can see it. think this is okay. All right, so we can see the ID. And what does this mean? If I go to players/0, what will that display to me? Well, we'll be making a request to /player/0. At that point, we'll be going here, right? Because it's just going to match it. Make the request, select all from players where the ID equals the ID that's getting passed through 0, right? And then it will return that individual player, players/0. And there we go, right? So this is returning just information about that one individual player. Okay, if you change this number to 1, then we're good. Okay, so questions before I move on. I'm about to explain this question mark. Okay, why do we have this question mark? Because the other alternative, right, was to do this, was to maybe put an F string here and just directly put the ID. This is a bad idea because users, like developers, kind of guess that, hey, this parameter here is connecting to your database over here. So what can we do? Let's, instead of putting the number 1, well, maybe we'll put the number 1, and then we'll put a semicolon, and then we'll put the phrase drop table users, semicolon. And I'll pass this through as my ID. What will that do? Now I will cursor.execute, select all from players where ID equals, and there will be 1. Cool, find the first user, or the second one, followed by drop the users table. Okay? This is called SQL injection. Okay? Where there, a user is maliciously trying to corrupt your database. Right? Another thing they could be doing is insert into, hey, I don't want to pay for Netflix. Insert into table users, blah, blah, blah. Right? So in other words, they're changing the database where they're supposed to, or changing the records in the database where they're supposed to be querying for data. Now this is easy to fix, right? Easy to prevent, which is we don't let the user directly access our query, like directly insert data into the string, but rather anything they pass through, this ID variable, say they pass through 1, drop table users, and that will go here now. Before it gets combined with our query, our SQLite library, Postgres, it will look for record things that like are changing the database. It will look for the fact that, okay, we're calling 2 different things here, you're making 2 different executions. It has various rules that it will apply to prevent SQL injection from occurring. All right. So this is why you're putting the question mark here, because in a web application, you have to let the user specify, like make some sort of request to your database, but you want to make sure it's doing something, right, that's copacetic, right, that's okay. So this whole thing here is to prevent SQL injection. Yeah? Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. We're going to just talk about one more thing, and that's going to be incorporating a model. So, and it may not feel like there's a very good use case for this quite yet. First of all, I'm just going to change this to fetch 1. The difference between, you see how this has a list here, an extra list? If I change it to fetch 1, remember this will return like a fetch all always returns a list, and then the inner data is also a list that has like Connor Bauman or whatever. So I'm just going to remove, because I know that this is the show page, I'm only getting 1 user back, I'm just going to remove this outer list by changing this to fetch 1. All right, so you can, it broke. Just copy this first, go back here, oops. Hold on, sorry, I have to stop sharing for a second. No, I don't, I'm good. All right, so you see that we got rid of that outer list. Okay, what's next? The next thing is we will create a class called player.py. Okay, and we will, I mean, there's different things to do, ways to do this. We can just call this my like data, I guess, or attributes for now. And then we can initialize, what we're going to do is take this data, instead of directly just returning the raw, this thing right here, what we'll do is we'll return an instance, okay? And we will pass through, like create an instance with the data we want. Like, his ID will be this, his name will be this. Let's see what else we got. So these are the different attributes that we have. So we'll pass through these attributes, and we'll do att, let's say the self dot ID equals attributes. We'll start with like 1, right? Is this attribute, this attribute. And we'll say self dot name equals the second attribute. And we'll say self dot number equals the third, 0, 1, 2, 3, and then this is the height. And this will be attributes of height. And that's good enough for now. So now what will we do? We want to, this is my player tuple, okay? So if I go to player with an ID of 1, we'll connect to the database, we'll get back this data, will be the player tuple, right? Then what we'll do, we'll initialize my player with the player tuple data. You can see this is undefined, but we can fix that easily. From player, import player. I shouldn't say easily. It's always famous last words. So, and this will be a player instance. And then finally, we'll just put a breakpoint here. So we're pulling the data. Someone's going to ask for, an individual. So they'll pass through like ID of 2. This will select the data that corresponds to that. Then we'll take that data, pass it through the model, right? Create an instance with that data. That will be caught by this guy. So we pass through this data, and we'll say, okay, let's assign the attribute this equal to the ID. Assign this equal to the name. Assign this equal to the number. That will come back here, and we'll now have this instance. All right, so let's try this. So we'll do players. Let's do players 3. All right, we're in our breakpoint. That's always a good thing. So we are right here. So what happened? I want you to be able to see this. Okay. So what happened? So we're right here. If you look at the player tuple, that is Travis, this guy. And that's because we did select all from players where ID equals 3. So we got this back. Then what happens next? If you look at player, player is an instance, and you can look at the data, right? The ID name, and this is corresponding perfectly. Why is this corresponding so well? Because we're just taking these attributes and passing it through the instance right here, and it's getting created right here. And then if you want to see this data, what we can do is we can say player.dunderdict, right? Turn this into a dictionary, and now JSONify that dictionary. Turn this into basically the string equivalent, the stringified version of that dictionary, and return that. I think this just works. Hold on. There we go. It worked. Okay, so how did this work again? Again, we connected to someone goes to this ID of 3, right? You can, we can now connect to the database, select all from players where the ID equals 3, okay? We initialize a new player from here, create it with the right data, right? Set all the attributes properly, assign it to this instance, to this variable, turn it into a dictionary, right? This way it's almost something we can send back to the browser, but we need to first turn it into a string. Now, this may feel like a lot of complication. Like, do we really need to turn this thing into an instance? When our classes start having some real methods, this will be very useful for us. Like you can imagine, just like as a small use case for this, let's say we do make a show.html file, and you can imagine that maybe I do render template the show.html, and I just pass through this player, right? Well, it's a little bit easier for me now to, in the show.html, display the player.name, right? And that's just like the name is, right? And it's just like, and the player dot number, or whatever the other attributes are, number, player dot height, right? You could say, well, I could still use a dictionary, but something like the player age, well, I should write an age function, right? Where I look at the birthday and calculate it. And then in the show page, I can just call player.age, and it will display the age for me, right? So using a class, using a model, and being able to run and access functions that like perform a calculation for me is very useful, and is also like the pattern that you will see throughout code bases. So just for now, it feels like maybe there's not a huge use case, but there will be. So now we can go to this players3, and it breaks because it didn't like that age thing. Did I remove it? Oh, yeah, I did. Okay, so let's do this again. It still doesn't like this. Incognito mode. Wow, what's going wrong? This is updated. Oh, I didn't restart it. This is working. The name is Travis, the number is 22, right? So what's happening here? We start here, /player/3. Go look at the controller. Start with the controller. This is really telling you everything. Catch this here. Connect to the database. Make the selection. Select all from players where the ID equals 3, right? That's coming from here. Then fetch just one record from the database. That's this tuple thing. That's this thing. Then we are initializing a class, passing this data through our player instance. Then we are rendering the template, show, and passing through player. Over there, we are accessing the instance and calling these attributes on it. Okay? And this is why these classes right here, these are called models. This is referred to as your model, where the model player is lining up to the table name players, right? You basically will have a separate model for each table in the database, okay? And this is, if you look at the screen, this is what we call this model view controller. Like I said, the name is kind of a little off in terms of the order. It goes to the controller first. You make the request. It goes to the controller. From here, you get the data. Let's write it out for /player. So if someone goes to /player/3.
Anybody else?
Oh, you can't see it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sonia, for pointing that out. Hold on. Let me try it again. All right, so this would be /players/3, right? The user goes to this. Can you see? Tell me if you can't see me, right? So what happens? We then
Can't see it.
You can't see it. All right, I forget the whiteboard. It probably wasn't so pretty anyway. So what happens? The user goes to /player/3. /3, it goes to the database and then initializes a new instance. This is the model part, right? The controller is like, we're in the middle of the controller. The controller really ties everything together. And then finally the view is sending back the HTML, this show.html. Okay, that's the view.
So the model is the classes, right?
Yes.
So is in the real world, is they also use the classes, or they use some database for the model? I was thinking like, if we make a query, for example, like gmail.com, I enter my username and password, it goes to database, or it comes from the classes?
No,
Like-
it goes, what it will do is you enter your username or you try to log in. It will, you know, it will do select all from users, you know. You can pass through multiple parameters here, but basically, ultimately, it will do, you know, select all from users. So first it will query the database, then it will create an instance of the class of the user with from that data. That's happening. This thing is for you. Like creating an instance is for the developer, is to make it easier from your perspective, because it makes it easier now that I go to the show and I just do player.name. And it makes it easier if, say, in the database I store the birthday and over here I do player.age, right? It makes it easier if I say want to see the last time this person played in a game, and I you know, so I have to again calculate how long ago that was, or you know, there are various methods that will be easier for you to just run, right? You get to make use of your methods if you take the data from the database, and then it just, you know, it takes basically nothing to now create an instance from it, and now you get access to all the methods that you define in your class. That's the benefit. I had to manually check for, oh, there was, okay. Thank you, Julia. So I should update my Zoom version. Other questions about this, this will take some time, obviously, to get used to. You know, one of the reasons why we teach this is, you know, this is the way, you know, I'm teaching you how Flask works, and it is just, you know, I didn't invent this. This is how Flask works. But, you know, if you talk to someone who knows Node, Node works the same way. They also have model view controller, and it follows the same pattern. If you look at someone like somebody who knows like Ruby on Rails, it follows the same pattern, right? Like many, like this is a predominant pattern in building APIs. So just recognizing it and being able to read a code base and figure out what's happening is super useful. Okay, SQL Academy. So the question is now, like, what about using something like SQL Academy? SQL Academy is just a library. SQL Alchemy is a library that will like query your database for you. For instance, you can do something like db.player. I forget exactly, but it's maybe like db.player.all, and it will run the SQL underneath for you, like select all from players, right? And this is nice, but then it has you all stop writing SQL for like a month or something, for as long as we use it. So because of that, we won't use SQL Alchemy, because it's better for you to just, as individuals learning, to just write the raw SQL as opposed to use SQL Alchemy as a library. All right. We will build our own little version of SQL Alchemy, which will give you some functionality, but not enough that you'll forget how to write SQL, which is nice. Okay, any other questions about this? I'm going to stop for